Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Welcome to the Specsavers Bench Opinions. We don't have a sponsorship, but we just decided to give ourselves one.
8 eyes on things.
Rather 8 eyes, you know the Germans always say.
We're like the VAR of bench opinions.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
No. See things clearly. We're missing Klaus today. There's a bit of a this and that with who's where in what episode.
I'm the one. I remain the one constant.
You are constant.
So if I possibly irritate someone, then they might be quite disappointed.
They're getting you every day this week.
Yeah, that's true.
We've also released the episodes this week in a different order. Today we're going to be talking about football.
Yes, a short tidbit. The episode that came out today, rugby, Klaus and I very proudly proclaimed was going to come out after football, forgetting that everything's digged around today. So, I mean, this week. So,
I think people also need to appreciate how complicated this is in our heads.
Yes.
We're talking about things in the past, in the future.
And if you forget what you're dealing with here, you need to just go rewind all the way to the beginning of the podcast where it very clearly says 3 idiots.
Yeah.
With amateur analysis.
Absolutely.
And idiots is kind of the underlined, bold part of it.
There's been a few things in the past, like 2 weeks or so, that have really underlined sometimes my lack of intelligence. But I want to get to that in the leftovers episode, rather.
Yeah. The way we've left the window open maybe is also not the smartest thing.
1 second.
All right. Now we can get to football.
Let's do it. Big weekend. Let's talk about the Bundesliga, or more, we can talk about the Bundesliga and the second Bundesliga.
Yeah.
Bayern were crowned Bundesliga champions.
Yes.
Thomas Müller, in his farewell, lifted the trophy, made a few bad jokes, and everyone got soaked in beer.
Nice for them. The 12th one in 13 years.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Harry Kane and Eric Dyer won their first trophy in their history.
Yeah, that is, I think, more impressive than anything else. Hopefully, the last trophy that any Spurs or ex-Spurs players win anytime soon.
Okay.
But yeah, good. Funny enough, I wouldn't say underwhelming. I think he sets his own high standards. But not the craziest season for Harry Kane in terms of goal scoring. Last year, he totally deserved to win a title. He played out of his socks last year.
Yeah.
But I think this year also, underpinning maybe Kompany's style of play, with Olise getting a lot of assists and goals. I think there's just a different style of play to the sort of traditional number 9 that Harry Kane had to fulfill up top. Looks like he's going to stay. There's a lot of talk about him maybe possibly leaving, but I don't see that now. And I think if he stays fit, I think he could probably go back to the Premier League and play for Spurs and break the Premier League goal scoring record.
Interesting call. Interesting take. It probably depends on where Spurs kick on to next in terms of who they get and what they do. One has to tip the cap to Vincent Kompany. I know with Bayern it's probably a little easier than with most clubs, but to come from Burnley after facing a little bit of criticism, I guess, really, I guess, changing the foundations at Burnley a lot. And I think that's what the Bayern bosses saw in him before they picked him. And he was people criticized the choice of going with such an inexperienced manager, but I think the Bayern fans are happy with him. I would suppose so.
I think it's hard to, and also let's not forget that he's coming to a side that didn't win a title for the first time in a long time. So there was work to be done at Bayern, and it's a bit of both. I think it's hats off to the Bayern hierarchy for trusting someone like him. And if you look at what Burnley have done now, they've bounced straight back up into the Premier League very convincingly under Scott Parker, and I'm sure a lot of the foundations, as you said, are laid by him. So let's see where they can go from now. The problem is that as you, because of the nature of the Bundesliga and how dominant Bayern are, the expectations are
you win
beyond that, doubles and triples, and he's got to try and get that right.
For sure.
And usually they're quite impatient.
Yeah, and I think the really tricky one is the Champions League, because they do expect to. I think they'll probably expect to always be amongst the final 4. Which in Europe, I think these days is becoming tougher and tougher if you look at which other teams are starting to compete. Some Italian teams coming back, like Inter. Paris seem to have found their feet. Just on the Bundesliga in general, there's a few players at Bayern who seem to be up for sale. Could be interesting. There's rumors of Goretzka being let go. Yeah. Sané might be...
Yeah, Sané's contract comes to an end, so they've offered him a new deal. Apparently he hasn't accepted and has come back with a counter offer.
Do you think those players are interesting to some Premier League teams, especially someone like Goretzka? Could he fit in at any club? He seems, to me, it strikes me as something like someone like Arsenal would buy without a plan of how to use him.
Which could be, I think he definitely provides an opportunity. I think if you look at the upwardly mobile teams, I think he presents an opportunity. So I think if Villa need to do some more astute business because of PSR, or Newcastle even need to do some astute business because of PSR, I think he's someone that comes in and definitely offers. I think he strengthens both of those squads.
Yeah.
There is obviously a higher element of risk to it. I think Sané is someone who's proven his worth in the Premier League before, albeit right at the beginning of his career, and then fizzled out, now kind of found form again. But I think the upwardly mobile teams, the teams that are looking to kind of continue to sort of to push for top six or continue to be a consistent top six side, I think Goretzka is definitely someone who's won a lot, got a winning mentality. He has the right physical profile as well, which is usually the concern with players coming from any league to the Premier League. I think he definitely has the right physical profile.
Especially middle of the pitch, yeah. I guess question would be the wages. I don't know what they're on currently. I assume Sané is on a hefty wage package. I don't know how many people in the Premier League would afford him. I know there's always some rumors about his attitude, about his how he gels with other players in the team.
There's definitely an air of disappointment, I think, with Sané, particularly in the German stock, because I think a lot of people thought you had a potential Ballon d'Or winner on your hands, and it just never really kind of came to fruition. And also, him being dropped for that World Cup in, when was it, 2018, when he got dropped for that World Cup by Löw, a lot of people questioned that decision. So did I. I would have taken him after the season he had. I know he was kind of coming back from injury, but since then it's just fleeting. It's a moment, and it's the same with Gnabry, for example, as well.
Jonathan Tah and Xabi Alonso are leaving Bayer Leverkusen. I think it's the worst kept secret in football that Alonso is going to start at Real Madrid. Carlo Ancelotti was announced that he's taking over the Brazil job now.
Yeah, very interesting.
Can Leverkusen mount a challenge next season?
I think they're being linked with Cesc Fabregas as a replacement for Xabi Alonso, and he's currently Como, his team in Italy, are on the best informed team in the whole of Europe. They've won, I think, 7 games in a row in the Italian league, which is crazy for a very small club, albeit very well financially backed club. And I think that would be the perfect appointment. And I think Leverkusen, unfortunately for the fans, and we've spoken about this before, about teams, when do teams kind of mature and when they get better. I think Leverkusen have found a really good middle ground of being financially stable. I always use this word, upwardly mobile, like always quite aspirational in the way they work, but they're quite realistic and sober about the way they go about things. So I think getting someone like Cesc Fabregas in, who's I'm sure also quite aspirational and has big aspirations, is the perfect move.
Yeah.
I don't see them mounting a challenge though.
No, it's probably tough to see with a new manager coming in. I guess it also depends on what happens with Florian Wirtz over the summer, who said that he's not interested in moving to Spain, but he has said that his dream move would be Bayern Munich. And usually when a player of that quality, especially when they're German, says that they're interested in Bayern, they usually go to Bayern. So
yeah, I mean, that's the Bayern conundrum. It's a big conundrum for the league. And how does one create a competitive environment within the league so that there are teams that can mount sustained challenges to Bayern. And that's one of the problems, I think, as well, is that Bayern is just such an attractive prospect for anyone that plays within the Germany setup, wants to stay in Germany but earn good money and be a high-profile player. I think that is the big conundrum. And you look at, we've spoken about Dortmund before and how they seem to function. It just makes no sense. They're perfect. Another example now, just to touch on Dortmund briefly, is Adeyemi is apparently on his way out of the club for pretty decent money, and people are saying, well, listen, if we're gonna get good money for Adeyemi, we might go to Naples by the looks of it. Let's get someone better. Yeah. And yet Dortmund are being linked with Kevin Schade from Brentford to replace Adeyemi, and I think it's a cycle that Dortmund's stuck in a little bit. It's almost like an opposition syndrome that they're in. Yeah. Look, Kovac has turned it around. I have to put my hand up there and say,
me too. I was very critical of him.
But he's turned it around, and let's see if he can get back to the level that he managed to get the Frankfurt team at.
True.
Then, and you could argue Frankfurt have benefited off his work all these years later as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he was the Kickstarter for that club. So let's see.
I suppose what Bayern does to teams like Dortmund, Leverkusen, Leipzig, and a few of the other teams in Germany, those same clubs do to the level below them. I remember that Dortmund used to pick off Gladbach, Bremen, all those players. So it's almost like the Bundesliga needs to import more talent from outside rather than just picking each other apart. It's almost like you need to not sleep with your own family.
Yeah,
there.
it's funny. They also, it's such a German kind of character trait. There's a lot of like respect and honor that goes on.
Yeah.
So players stay till the end of their contracts.
Yeah.
But what you end up seeing is that so many players move for free.
Yeah.
And I think some clubs have to take a bit of a risk and be like, hey, listen, we know he's our really good player. And that's why I think the talks are with Leverkusen and Wirtz are that they're going to try and do everything in their power to prevent him from going to Bayern. But let's be honest, if Bayern come in and say, here's 150 million euros and he wants the move, then you hold your hand up and you say, let's move on and let's go. For sure.
Have to sell.
Yeah.
All right, enough about the Bundesliga. Let's talk about the second Bundesliga just for one episode.
I get goosepimples when you say that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My second club back into Hamburg, back into the first division. And my goodness, what scenes.
It was crazy.
I've watched, I think, 3 or 4 long-form YouTube episodes about the aftermath of that.
Big pitch invasion.
Yeah, the pitch got taken apart.
Pitch got ripped apart.
The goals were stolen.
But don't you still have a few matches left?
No,
Okay,
we've only got one away.
matches.
We've only got
Okay.
one away game left. Thank God. Yeah. Apparently, they also they agreed with police that they would open the gates.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about panic or anything setting in. So that was quite interesting to hear. Very also non-German to see like. Let them on the pitch. But yeah, insane scenes. Apparently, party till the early mornings. The women's side got promoted as well the day after.
Look at you guys.
So we're all upwardly mobile.
10 years it's been?
No. This was our 7th season.
Okay.
Just
as my phone's.
You see, your phone's fact checking you there. Your phone's fact checking you. It's like.
I updated my phone and now it talks to me at random times. It's talking to my watch, which never happened
it's
before.
That new Android update.
Yeah. Okay, so it's been 7 years. You're coming back.
Yeah.
Is there a slight concern about how you'll compete?
Yeah, massively. And it's also, again, such a difficult scenario to try and work out. So, as I said, I've watched a lot of long-form episodes and a lot of people trying to see what kind of approach would be right and what approach do you think the club's going to take. So currently, they sort of estimate that Hamburg squad is worth about 30 million euros. And the board have said that they want to try and, going into the Bundesliga season, they want to try and get it to 40 million.
Okay.
So that's some of the indications of what they're trying to do. So it's not a huge jump, but 40 million gets Hamburg into sort of the lower half of the mid-table teams in Bundesliga, in the first Bundesliga.
Right.
So seems like, in terms of that, we know football doesn't happen on paper, but that seems like a decent move. So don't overshoot it. Get yourself into a place where you could be competitive, and let's see what you can do. We're fortunate to have a very young team, so that means you would think that there would be some further development in there, even with the jump in class. Young manager team, which is the concern to a certain degree, but a manager team that has done no wrong so far and seems to be really hell-bent on making sure that the fans are the most important thing and playing for the club. And I think that's the really most important thing. I think a lot of coaches that come up, we've seen it with Russell Martin, for example. We saw it with Company as well in the Premier League. Sort of forget that you want to get results, you want to stay in the league. So there's not going to be any of this sort of philosophical try and play a certain
my culture, my tactics, my system.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right.
And I think that'll be good. And maybe the naivety in that sense will help the young management team. And then the last point that I read about is that there was also talk by the board that they want to change up to 50% of the starting lineup.
Okay.
Usually what you see on average is about a 40% change when teams get promoted. So again, they're sort of just above what the average is, the benchmark is. And hopefully, look, the club is huge. The club shouldn't be a second division club. So I think holistically, the structures are there to keep the club in the league. But it's going to be a massive challenge.
It's interesting that there's so many, stats floating around, and there will be a lot of numbers on what teams look like once they get promoted. and how many of them go down, and what the reasons are for that. And I guess the statistical approach to especially transfers and getting new legs and getting people who might have a little bit of Bundesliga experience and makes absolute sense.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you want to give yourself the best possible foundation to stay in the league. And I think there it is good and a smart way to do it is just based on sound statistics, at least as a yardstick to go, okay, where we're going. Can't forget this is the first ever promotion that Hamburg has ever had to work through. So everyone in the club, no matter how long they've been there, have never experienced anything like this before. A couple of question marks. There's a young Czech player that's had a good season, who's been on loan from Slavia Prague. 4 million price tag though if we want to activate his buy, which is big money. If you look at that 40 million mark again. Questions around Davy Zelke, our lead goal scorer this year, because he has had a great season. But the question is if that style of play and his style of goal scoring will work in the Bundesliga. But you struggle to believe how that team continues to fight and exist without him as a personality. So, interesting. I think it's
almost a clash between what the romance of football is with sort of you come up as a team, you've fought for this promotion and you'll fight together to stay in the league next year, compared to let the stats take over. There's a reason there's Bundesliga and second Bundesliga players, and some people just don't work in the Bundesliga. They're just not good enough. And you almost need to have a completely different approach to the year before when you got promoted, which is just fight relegation in that first season.
Yeah.
Just stay up.
Exactly. And the one thing that I'm quite happy about is that compared to the Premier League, promoted teams in Germany tend to fare better. So I'm hoping that we can take some inspiration from our loud neighbors, St. Pauli, and stay up.
That's the good thing, is there's a few teams in the Bundesliga that will remain in the Bundesliga this year, that won't get relegated, that will always be down there fighting. And Werder Bremen is unfortunately one of them. It's just every season is just merely about surviving relegation. Union Berlin will be down there. St. Pauli will be down there. Yeah. There's enough positivity to take from that kind of thing. Whereas in the Premier League now, if you're looking, and that might be a good switch, is promoted clubs that come up, and we addressed it briefly last week. Some of the sort of lower clubs and the ones that you would have in the past thought that would get relegated are really becoming established now and are kicking on.
Yeah.
Which is making it hard for promoted teams to sort of fight for survival.
Yeah, and I think it's within the Premier League, and I think the Bundesliga is also, again, just a little bit different there. But within the Premier League, it's almost like this. You can use the approach of business where they say, 80% of businesses fail within the first 3 years or something. I think if you get past sort of a third season or 2 seasons in that Premier League, you're so financially stable. And if you're well run, I think that's the beauty of it, is you have the ability to then turn into like a Champions League team like Aston Villa have since they came back up. And now Newcastle obviously is a bit of a different example because of the Saudi money, but still they've gone about their business very smartly. Picked a very good manager. I can't praise Eddie Howe enough. Again, getting another result on the weekend. But then the funny thing within the German league that you almost see more, I would say, than the Premier League, is that some teams just shoot through the roof. Like all of a sudden in their second season they're in Europe all of a sudden, with Heidenheim, for example, and then you're a fish out of water. Now
you're fighting above your weight class.
And it could hurt you. So it's interesting to see how different the different leagues are and how they function.
I think let's close out speaking about Arsenal and Arteta. They were knocked out of the Champions League in the semi-final by PSG. I think if you're a neutral, you can pretty confidently say that the better team won over 2 legs. Arsenal did show some fight, but they definitely weren't better than PSG. There was moments where they were better than them. The first 20 minutes of the return leg, they were definitely all over them, but the better team went through. They also are second at the moment in the Premier League with the chance of even dropping down to third. They're not going to win a title again. Was it progress for Arsenal and for Arteta and the project that he keeps referring to?
Do I think Arsenal continue to progress? Yes. And only because I know what's going to happen now in the summer. They've identified the striker position, they've identified a couple of other positions, and they're going to back Arteta to the hilt, which I think given the current situation, 100% validated. Do I think within the context of the Arsenal fans and what comes out of Arteta's mouth and their mouth, I don't think it's progress. And I don't think you can look me in the eye and say,
Yeah.
this is because we can't forget how Arsenal fans speak about Arteta and speak about their own side, and how Arteta speaks about his own side. I think it's a little bit devoid of reality. I don't know if he kind of sets the markers and goes, okay, I'm gonna set the market. I'm gonna talk. You know, I'm gonna try and get what I ask for in terms of what they do. But it's not good enough, because they weren't close to winning the title, the Premier League.
No, they weren't.
They were out the cups relatively early. And let's be honest, PSG were the far better team over the two legs, I think. And the scoreline says it, you know.
I was thinking about this at length over the last few days, because if one looks at Arsenal over the last 20 years, you had Arsene Wenger, who, I think 21 years ago they won their last title with the Invincibles. That was the 03-04 season? Or was it
04-05?
04-05.
Yeah.
So 20 years ago they won their last title. Then for a while, Arsenal still competed for the league. And then there was a large stretch where Arsene Wenger famously said top four is like a title. And they sort of became this, I don't even know what to call it. A top four side that would sort of get to the round of 16 in the Champions League, but never really compete for anything, win an FA Cup or a League Cup here or there.
Yeah.
Then they fired Wenger because he wasn't aspirational enough. And there was a few other managers who then tried to make them kick on, but they actually regressed. They fell off, which I guess is to be expected sometimes with a new manager. And Arteta's come in, and he's sort of come in under this cloud of bringing the club back to its glory days. But sometimes it feels like he's just another Arsene Wenger. Like he's just fighting for top four. I just don't know if he's got it in him to win a title, especially a Premier League title, because I don't know if he can compete over that stretch of time.
Well, yeah, and we have to just look at the last few seasons. They've shit the bed every time. They've very clearly dropped off in form at the worst possible time. This year was a bit different because Liverpool was streaks ahead, but the previous seasons they were in it, and when it came time to perform, they dropped the ball.
One mustn't forget that they were only 4 points behind us in February, end of February. Exactly. I don't know if there was games in hand, but they were 4 points behind. There was a lot of talk that Liverpool would crumble, but it was the opposite. I mean, I'm usually nervous as a Liverpool fan because of we've been branded by fighting against City over the last 5 years, and they're just a different breed when it comes to the title run, and they don't drop points anymore.
The issue and the difference I see here between Arteta and Wenger is that Wenger, I think, even though I cannot stand him and I've never liked him, and his comments about United not supposed to qualify for Champions League through the Europa League, just give me a break from Mr. Fourth Spot. But the very big difference is that, and this is why I said I thought this season would be the beginning of the end for Arteta, is Wenger had to kind of navigate the whole move to the Emirates Stadium. Yeah. And I think that was a big financial burden. They would have never admitted it, but I think that was some of the reasons why he was told, listen, dude, purse strings are tight. You got to make it work. Yeah. Champions League is what we need. So I defend him, even though I don't like him. Yeah. But Arteta doesn't have that issue. All the talk now this summer is that they're going to back him to the hilt, and I still don't think he has it. And I think that's why I predicted that this season, if they didn't get it done this season, it would be last chance saloon, and I just don't see him doing it.
Yeah. I'm with you. I would definitely agree with you that Arsenal have progressed. You can't say that they haven't, even though that they might finish second or third regardless. Their points tally might be less. They've now gotten to the semi-final of Champions League, which is a step up. They are playing good football. There's a few kinks missing in their armor. But yeah, you're right. If next season, with all the backing that he's going to get, they still don't win, then I think you can ultimately say that the project that he keeps referring to hasn't been successful.
100%, and it's rich coming from me as a last thought. It's rich coming from a United fan, because United fan base is also in complete tatters. But I think really, I genuinely, and Patrice Ever came out and said as well this week, it is the fan base. It is the fan base to a certain degree. It is Arteta to a certain degree. And I think if you change the narrative in that club and become maybe a little bit more intact with reality, even with regarding people like Saka, I think you will benefit.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that this doesn't go for all Arsenal fans, obviously, but there's Arsenal fans that have made a name for themselves and that have gathered in popularity, especially in other fan bases, because we like to laugh at them and see them flip out, who are so incredibly negative about their club and who just wait for the smallest opportunity to get on a camera and swear at their manager or at any player, and it just creates such a negative atmosphere in that whole fan base.
It's weird because the negativity stems from them being so hellbent that this team is the team.
Yeah.
You know, that Arteta is the prodigal son. And I think that's the concern here. Yeah. And look, this is, I think he was out of order saying it, but there's a reason Erling Haaland used the word "stay humble."
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot to be said for that. Because I think maybe if the highs aren't so high, the lows won't be so low.
I think that might have been the fucking neck breaker for them this season. Was when he said that, because when they then came back, I think they drew with City, or did they beat City at the beginning of the season? And everyone shouted at him.
I think they drew with City with 10 men. Yeah,
and then they told him to stay humble and stuff like that. It seemed like that was their Premier League title.
Just too many distractions.
Yeah. All right, interesting to keep an eye on that. I think the rest of the league, the relegations have been confirmed. There's a great fight for top 4 that's happening currently. There's so many teams that are still in it. Did you see the Nottingham Forest owner get onto the pitch and give Nuno Espirito Santo talking to after a draw with Leicester?
Yeah, taken out of context a bit, in my opinion. And I think Marinakis then handled it very well. First of all, you can't be upset at Marinakis. No. What he's done with that club is unbelievable. And he's a bit of more of a hands-on owner. And if you were to ask me, would I prefer Marinakis to a Glazer, 100 every day of the week, a Marinakis. I think his big concern was they were quite upset because Awoniyi was cleared to stay on the pitch, but then couldn't continue, and then they played for 10 men and they were chasing the game. Well, not chasing the game, they were chasing the winner. So I get it, but he came out afterwards and he, I think he's just extremely ambitious, and he's disappointed, and that's cool. Great to see him wear his heart on his sleeve like that.
Because they're in touching distance of it.
Yeah.
They just need to keep at the ball. They were I think they were ahead by a decent stretch, and now they've sort of fallen into this battle. But
they've qualified for Europe though, so which is brilliant for them. Yeah.
Great success. So we'll see how that develops.
Yeah.
Anything else on the footballing front?
Excuse me, I just burped into the mic. Next week is the Europa League final, and the Champions League finals are coming up, but we'll cover that next week. Do a nice big preview.
Yeah. I don't even know what we're going to call that Europa League final, but we're going to have to find a name for it. The fact that it's like a mudslinging contest between 17th and 16th place
I'm very excited.
I'm sure you are. All right, that wraps it up for a footballing episode.
Arrivederci.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.